Ready to light that fire by doing the things that make you come alive? Welcome to Health Raisers, a podcast for wise women. I'm your host, Dr. Nadine. I left a soul-crushing medical career full of bad news and evolved into a joyful health integration coach, helping hundreds of women find their healthy. You're more than your dress size. Stop putting up with toxic relationships, swallowing your true emotions, and sacrificing your mental health. Stop using your body as a battlefield. You're always giving. You deserve to put yourself first, not just for your sake, but for those you love. Wise women, let's make ourselves a priority right now. It's time to raise some health together. Hello, wise women. You know that my podcast focuses on multidimensional health across 6 pillars: social, emotional, mental, physical, intellectual, and spiritual. In the past, I have welcomed guests like integrative health promoter Shirley Archer and horticulturist Brenda Shelton, who have shared insights on topics ranging from the healing benefits of nature to the importance of community for our well-being. This year, we are starting with social health, exploring how contributing to our community enhances the well-being of all. For the first time, I'm bringing on a guest to address our role as stewards of our planet. And I couldn't think of a more fitting person for this essential topic than my friend, Tania Marien. Tania and I first connected as podcasters and coaches in the podcast fellowship led by Seth Godin and Alex DePalma. She is the host of Talatera podcast, where she shares conversations with freelance environmental professionals who use creative approaches to science communication, nature awareness, and public outreach. She also interviews researchers whose work deepens our understanding of how people learn about our environment outside of traditional classrooms. Tania, thank you so very much for being here. This is a long overdue conversation, and I can't wait to get into it.
Thank you, Nadine, for the invitation.
I want to start with this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. And this is something that actually started for me at the top of the pandemic. When things were so bleak, I actually started a place on my desktop and in my email where I formed these folders labeled hope because, fear sells, anxiety gets us going. We're as social animals more primed for danger. So my first question for you is, how do you maintain a hopeful outlook when it comes to protecting and taking care of our environment?
What I do personally is I spend time outside. I garden, I ride my bike, I go for walks, go for a run. Those types of activities that I do personally. When I'm in my office, I play my yoga radio station or my or nature sound studios on Pandora. And so I will listen to that as well. Outside of myself, I try to encourage outdoor activities with other people and try to plan things outside. Online, our virtual existence that we've come to manage so well. Mm-hmm. Have also personally hit the wall with all of that. I think I've run out of a lot of energy for that, and I'm starting to lean back to doing things in person, or trying to anyway. I do a lot online, and I love it, and I so love the opportunities that it affords. But there has to be balance, and so just try to spend time outside and to help others do what they do outside.
What does spending time outside do for you specifically?
It is calming. It is, the sun feels good on my skin. It's peaceful. It's primarily it's calming. So here I have a great example of contrast. The front yard is a native garden, and it's grown in nicely. The backyard's still primarily dirt, and the backyard is stressful, and the front yard isn't. And so we spend a lot of time sitting on the porch because there's layers of vegetation, there's birds, all sorts of lizards and, other wildlife. There's bunnies, there's the occasional coyote. It's just peaceful. And I don't know how else to articulate what else is happening. It's a very good question. Calming comes to my mind first. The backyard is stressful. That's the first thing that comes to my mind about the backyard.
So how did you begin getting into your work, being an independent freelancer, an educator who champions learning about the environment outside of the classroom and extending that into the community? I think that's very unique. I think it's unique to highlight the people that are doing the work outside the classroom and actively connecting citizens of the community to learn about and take responsibility and feel the passion for that work. How did you start that? Because it's well before your podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it's well before the podcast. So when I went to school, my objective was to teach at the community college. That's where I had the best college experiences. And I wanted to do for other students what my biology professors and others have done, did for me. And that's my thing. And so that's what I prepared for. And then I did do that for a little while, but being a freeway flyer, as adjunct faculty are called, zipping around from one campus to another, I got grumpy. I became a grumpy adjunct, and so I stopped doing that.
Okay.
And so I took a break for a while, and then one day my mom saw this botanical illustration class at a local arboretum. She says, "You want to take it with me?" I said, "Sure." And then things clicked. Then I became aware of what I had naturally gravitated to during spring break and summer break when I wasn't writing labs and grading papers or writing lectures. And I saw what I already had on the wall in terms of illustrations. I saw the book about women illustrators on my bookshelf. And so I started to explore that more, and I joined a wonderful community, the Botanical Artists Guild of Southern California, and it was in their earlier years, and they're still around doing fantastic work, some 25 years later. And I went to meetings, and at the time they were only meeting quarterly, and I thought that it was a shame that we were only meeting quarterly, and I pitched the idea to start a newsletter so that people could stay connected between meetings. And they said, "Sure, go try it." And so I started a print newsletter, which quickly became a 20-page print newsletter, the Southern California Botanical Artist, and about everything that was happening in Southern California and with the people in the group and beyond. And this is a long time ago. And so I would actually, be driving to people wherever they were to interview them. That's just how all those interviews happened. And earlier days of the internet or of email. And so, and then from that rolled into that activity just fed what I had always, what my own observations was that, these beautiful, elegant ways that people were illustrating plants, they didn't always know the names of the parts that they were illustrating. And I brushed it off at first. And then I heard stamen, the male reproductive parts of a plant, of a flower. called These Thingies one too many times. I said, I can solve this. And so then I started my educational website. And then from there, addressing what was coined in the botany and science education literature as plant blindness, the fact that people are more aware of animals and they can tell you more about animals than they could about plants. And that was the foundation of what I used to do. And I did that for many years. And so there was a teaching and learning column, there were interviews, there was all sorts of outreach activities, environmental education events. I had a bookstore associated with that, and a traveling bookstore, an online bookstore. And so I would do book fairs and all sorts of different things, public events. And that just fueled my interest in engaging with the public and informal learning environments. And, then I went on to study what is called free choice learning environments. And so at Oregon State University, and in their professional certificate program, which was a full 1-year program about how people learn outside of the classroom and in museums, in gardens, and all sorts of other settings that aren't, part of a formal traditional classroom setting. And so I did all that. And then when that endeavor came to a natural close, I went back to being curious about the people who do this type of work. And so, because I would cross paths with other people who were working independently, but never had time to speak with them, because when you do an event, you're busy setting up your stuff, doing what you're doing there, and then packing your car again and then leaving. And so I never had a chance to have in-depth conversation with them. And so that's what I wanted to do. And so I started to investigate that idea. And that's the idea that I workshopped through the Alt MBA, which was an akimbo program. And from there, my hunch that there was a story here with everybody who worked independently, that was just reinforced by the first 3 phone conversations that I had with people, and then a survey that I'd put out. And I knew that there was something here to talk about. And then instead of going back to written interviews like I had done previously, I wanted to explore podcasting. And that's how I ended up in the podcasting workshop when I learned how to podcast. And that's a fit, because I wanted to have people hear the voices of the people who are working in communities, hear them tell their own stories. And I also wanted to provide an opportunity where the professionals and the educators would hear themselves tell their stories. I think it's valuable to hear hear yourself speak about what you do. I don't know. I think it's reinforcing also.
And now, here's an ad from our sponsor. In the mood for coffee, tea, yummy pastries, or cool swag? My friends at Infusco have got you covered. Infusco Coffee Roasters is a cozy neighborhood coffee joint in Sawyer and St. Joseph, Michigan. Infusco stands for a healthy community. They craft irresistible seasonal drinks, sourcing local artisans' products. The flavors shine from quality ingredients, and their beans are roasted on site. They do not hide behind tons of sugar. Every time I go, I'm greeted by my name with a smile. Bad service is just non-existent. It feels like stepping into a friend's living room. They keep it personal. Old school, eclectic coffee mugs on the wall, fun merch, including stickers designed by artists, t-shirts, and sweatshirts. It's the perfect place to get to know your neighbors and chat with tourists. You will always find people deep in conversation. Special events keep it fresh. Community, health, the heart of Sawyer. That's Infusco. I hope to meet you there. So highlighting the underdogs or the unseen, the champions, the heroes who are in the background is what I'm hearing you say, and being able then to find alternative ways for us to interact with the discussion of taking care of our environment.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because there are more, wonderful large organizations doing wonderful things, but not everyone belongs to an organization. I mean, there's more out there happening at different levels. And one of the questions that I asked early on was, what venues do you work at? And I listed in my questionnaire all the predictable ones: museums, nature centers, zoos, parks, that type of thing. And I had another option, and 43 people came back with filling out that other option. And they ended up telling me about 60 different other spaces in the communities that they were doing their work in, from dinners, from corporate settings, community centers, all sorts of libraries, all sorts of other settings. And so that told me that, one, besides reinforcing again that there was a story here, that these are individuals who are literally moving through communities. And so finding out, who they are, what they do, and how they do it, I think is valuable to learn. And it's still an objective of mine is to be able to introduce this wonderful group of people to prospective partners, potential partners, and to let others know that they're there. Because when organizations look for partners, they go to other organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many people out there, I bet, that, I'm sure, that would make wonderful community partners. It's just they're below the radar. They don't have an address, they don't have a website, they don't have a brick and mortar location. So, yeah.
So when you were doing your early work, and I'm sure this still comes up in your current work, and your discussions with the people in the community, the advocates for the environment, in interesting ways, what are some misconceptions that are held by the public, the person or the lay person, the person in the community who is not aware of the importance of taking care of our environment?
That somebody's out there already doing it, that what they are doing, they couldn't possibly fix anything, or that, what they choose to do in their own household was not going to matter. I think that I think that somebody else is doing it is probably one of the big ones.
So I like that. That's important, yes. But I also like what you said about feeling like we're insignificant. Essentially, what I'm doing in my house doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So take big corporations. Like, we have no power over how they are interacting with the environment. They're byproducts of their mass production, how that may be harming the environment. How does one prevent themselves from feeling powerless?
I recommend. I'm trying not to. I'm trying not to should here, but I have ideas. Here's my thoughts. I would encourage people to look who's doing what kind of work in their communities. The obvious places would be the natural resource centers or national resource organizations. Yes, the nature centers. Yes, the museums. But there are a lot of groups out there who are doing all sorts of all types of public engagement that don't really even hit the local newspapers, and they just don't get a lot of attention. So you kind of have to ask around. Because I've seen plenty of like county level natural resource organizations and historical sites and things like that get their regulars turn out for their events, but I don't know that how many other people find out about the events that they do. So I would start there, and then these days there are a lot of larger organized climate groups in neighborhoods, and so going to like climate reality project or the 350 organizations to find a local chapter of that type organizations like that would be a good place to start. And so why seek out these organizations? To find out people, to meet people who are concerned about the same things that you're concerned with, just to find out what's happening. It's because people see people who work in those types of clubs are doing those types of activities, they are also very much in tune with what's happening policy-wise with local policy, or maybe some what's happening with other nonprofits happening on the city level. And so once you get connected to those types of people, you start seeing things that you'd never seen before. So for example, like you might not have known that there is a there is a active organized group of community gardens in your area. Maybe that you didn't know that. Maybe you didn't know that your city had started a climate action plan. Maybe you didn't know that your city had an office of sustainability, or maybe it's a new office of sustainability that people don't know about yet. And maybe there are neighborhood conferences that you don't know about yet, or that you've never noticed. And so once you start getting involved with local groups or asking questions of local groups, really the world opens up in a big way and in a surprising way, because there is a lot going on locally, and people just don't really know that. That's type of news that you're not going to get from the radio or even necessarily from the local newspaper, because you can submit those events, but it doesn't mean that they're going to actually show up.
There has to be a leap, is what I'm hearing you say. There's got to be a reason to combat our sense of inertia, or this sense of this small thing that I'm doing doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. So I'll give you an example. I go between Chicago and Michigan, and I have the privilege to be able to do that. And I also have the self-awareness to be able to notice how I feel when I'm in those different environments. Being in the downtown area of a big city versus the countryside, small town. So it's a very unique lens that, again, I'm very lucky, very grateful, very happy to have, where I can compare and contrast. And I didn't set out doing this, but it just happened. And what I notice is this sense of, like you said, to come back to the beginning, the sense of peace and calm when I return to being surrounded by trees and space and flowers and grasses, an open space compared to downtown living, where it's very much, I've watched buildings in the 5 years since we've been in that area erected one after another. And so what are you doing when that happens? It's just getting rid of our natural resources. They put 5 tiny trees or little boxes in front of the building that have a few flowers or plants in front of it to look like a natural background. But I feel very starved when I'm in that area. That's one observation. The other observation is sort of this focus on I know we're all busy, and I'm not saying this is malicious, but small things like, so at the top of the pandemic, another thing that happened was a lot of people got pets, and dogs specifically. That's a big responsibility, and it doesn't just affect you, it affects everyone else. So when you go walk your dog and you decide not to pick up after your dog, which I've watched a ton of people do, that affects everyone else. It does. There's a terrible vermin problem in the loop where I am, and that's part of the contributing factor. So I wonder at what I'm doing, does it make a difference? Or what I'm doing is not going to have an impact on anyone else. By such a small act as not picking up after your dog.
Yes.
Not to mention, it's just disgusting for those of us who actually want to take a walk and you can't because you're distracted by the filth.
Yeah.
At least I am. Maybe I'm just a lunatic.
Yeah. No, you're not. Yeah. Small acts matter for sure. Small actions. And and I think if one is feeling alone or helpless, seeking out local groups, you start to see things differently. You learn how to care for local historic sites or local environments. Everything all of a sudden becomes a different viewpoint. So, for example, there's in Riverside. It's because it's a city along a river, but this river happens to be the Santa Ana River, and it happens. There's rivers around here these days. There's a lot of cement-lined rivers and things like that. But there's this river still has a lot of natural habitat to that, and so there's an effort to make that the usable space and a space for families to visit. There's a bike path that runs along from the from this area out to the beach. There's that, but just to bring. It's an effort to bring back the river, to the people and get people and remind people that it's there, and that will go a long way. I think to reminding people of not just that the river's there, but it's also creating the conditions for conversations around wildlife and plants and watersheds and how what we do or what we put in the storm drain, goes out to the oceans and all sorts of different conversations.
What would you say to those people who feel a lack of connection to a natural environment? Because again, from these observations based on a very concrete centered downtown big city living canvas compared to a more open, natural, wooded landscape. What would you say to the person who doesn't feel that natural connection?
Yeah, I would ask questions about what elements of nature they do encounter on a daily basis. Oh, so like, for example, let me go back to what I used to do when I used to write, when my focus was plant awareness, botany education, and art and illustration and all that. I had for a while, a component of that effort was called Interpret Plants. And my objective there was to bring awareness to the many ways that people interact with plants, whether it's an actual physical plant, an actual tree, or it's clothing, it's their desks, it's whatever. And just to really make the point and and drive home the point that you don't need to go to a national park. You don't need to go to a botanic garden. There's many ways. And now, there's bamboo toothbrushes, and, there's many ways that we encounter or have contact with the botanical world. Of course, there's food and all sorts of other ways. I would start a conversation along that lines about all the different ways that they do encounter the outdoors. And sometimes, there is a lot of concrete, and sometimes maybe it starts with a conversation about houseplants. Maybe it starts with a conversation about the ants that they see, or maybe it starts with a conversation about the ravens that are, they see on their lawn or on top of their trash cans or wherever. Maybe it starts with a conversation, especially around here, about how the landscape is changing. There are warehouses everywhere around here, surrounded by warehouses.
Yes.
And there is active conversation about that around here. But that would be a good place, I think, to start. And maybe it's a conversation about what is planted in a schoolyard, or the gardens that are planted in schoolyards, or the lack of gardens that are planted in schoolyards. I know here we have, the naval orange industry had a big presence here. And I've noticed that when they clear an area, they install citrus trees again, just as an accent planting, but it's like, yeah, this is what used to be here, but now we've got this big building here. And so, it's a nod to history. I guess it depends on the location. I would, that's a very good question, but I would start with something that they know well. And
so I know that the idea of lifelong learning is very important to you, as it is to me. And part of being a lifelong learner is, I think, what I'm hearing and what you're saying is creativity and finding ways to find solutions, find different answers, find different methods to advocate for something that you care about. So in the guests that you interviewed in the past in the written form and through today to the podcast in the spoken form, what have been some surprising creative ways that you've noticed people in the community who are passionate and have decided to become these freelancers, these champions for educating outside of, as you said, those traditional, I'm going to the park, or I'm going to go to the art or to the museum to look at these things that are very separate for me. What are some examples of some surprising creative things that you've encountered?
I would say the first that comes to mind is game design. I had a conversation with someone who used to be a biologist with the National Park Service, and then left to establish his great game design practice. And so these were games around natural resources. And so that's one way. Another way is, of course, scientific illustration. Visual science communication. I'm a huge fan of science illustration, botanical illustration. So there's that, and the many ways that these individuals are creating forms of communication on their farms, for museums, for journals, for interpretive panels, for children's books. I mean, in all sorts of ways. Another way would be that comes to mind: experience design. This person who I spoke with, who creates all sorts of experiences in different settings. That's one. Another way would be, there is a bike path in the UK, and there used to be, and I don't know, I'm sure it's probably still there, but I haven't checked lately. But since you brought this question up. I'm thinking of that first. That was a stop for cyclists, but this stop also offers classrooms or workshops rather, and courses and things. And so there have been people there who have led all sorts of creative workshops around nature and the environment in all sorts of different forms. Some of them are botanical illustrations. Some of them are just, other types of activities. So that's so I think they were offering quirky workshops, and those are definitely quirky workshops. Creative experiences in an out of way place for sure. There's been people who've one example, climate educators who've gone to the Arctic and gotten involved with research that are doing research at the Arctic. I can think there's so many examples, and I can't think of. I'd have to go through my list. But when I reach out to people, when I see what they're doing, I reach out to them because they're definitely taking a different approach. And what has always struck me when I've reached out to them is they're kind of surprised that someone wants to talk to them about what they're doing.
Oh,
and so I said, "Do you want to talk to me?" I said, "Well, yeah. I mean, don't you see what you're doing? It's all the different ways that you're changing people, showing them something they haven't seen before or they haven't experienced before." And so that's been a consistent from even when I was doing written interviews to now. Some people are surprised that I wanted to talk to them. What creative things? Oh, one person that I interviewed once created sculptures of plants and had an exhibition about sculptures of plants. Then there's another person who does exhibitions about our use of plastic. And she does amazing work, and she creates clothing with plastic coffee liners, cereal liners, from those that type of packaging. She takes computer cables and like extension cord cables, that type of thing, and creates clothing. That is Calliope Munoz. That's what she's doing right now. Active. I mean, this is high fashion stuff. It's really amazing clothing that she's doing. And so there's so many different avenues. I couldn't recount them all of the conversations that I've had. There's, that ranges from permaculture to research in naturalist identities to creating after-school programs, to workshop experiences that explore the non-human world, people's interaction with the non-human world. It takes all forms: painting, expeditionary art. There are a lot of examples out there.
What has been the general response to these various forms from your guests when they recount their work, their unique contributions? What has been the general response, and have they feel like they've started a little bit of a movement or turned on the light for someone who might start to think about the fact that we're not separate from nature?
Yeah. They all feel that what they're doing is clearly worthwhile. And in all the many different examples, they've all established their own networks, their own relationships, their own partnerships. Sometimes it's with the school, sometimes it's with a researcher, sometimes it's with a college. Like, for example, the person who is the game designer is teaching now at a college doing game design. And they all have this, are sure that they are making a difference in helping people see things in new ways. And, one of the questions that I asked in my early survey when I first started my current project was, do you feel, I asked a question along the lines of, do you feel that you are making an impact? And they all said, yes, they're all doing something, a positive, and starting new conversations, in bringing more awareness to the natural world, and how people interact with it. And so that is their that's their viewpoint. And from all of the experiences that they've had with their own respective students and the people they've engaged with, and that is reinforced. They also receive positive encouragement and feedback. And so, yeah.
Have you found that it's varied by generation?
Good question.
So as you're pondering, something that I've encountered is, and something also that's not, I think, foreign to us generally, is this idea of ageism. Okay, ageism, where, the old adage, you can't teach a dog new tricks. Occasionally I'll run into a person who says, and it's a little subconscious, we'll be having a conversation and it's with a wise woman or a wise man, a wise person, who'll say something like, well, the younger generation, there's hope there. And I always think to, and started to think to myself, well, why isn't there hope throughout our lives? Or why does it have to be passed on to kind of another form of helplessness where someone else will figure it out? The younger generation will figure it out. They're the ones who do the work. They're the ones who have the energy for it. So, yeah, so that is partly why I asked you this question.
There's a lot of emphasis on the next generation, on younger professionals. The National Association for Environmental Education has this wonderful feature every year of the 30 under 30, highlighting what is happening all over the world. The field of environmental education has a very heavy K-12 focus, and so there is a lot of work being done with those younger groups. But is there? That's a very good question. That's a question that's worth asking specifically of, does it vary by age? Not in my, I've never heard anybody, let's see, I'm thinking of everything of that. I would say the people who've been in the field a long time are very energized by people who are coming in after them, younger people, the emerging professionals and what they're doing. And I don't know. I don't get that. I don't get that sense. And you know what? I don't get that sense that there's any ages. I think there is awe and appreciation and of what everyone's done, in the field. Yeah. No, I don't know. It's a good question. I give you a specific answer.
So amongst your guests, if you think about your guests and the people that you've talked to and the people that they've encountered in the community and the grassroots movements that they've formed, does it seem inclusive? Is there diversity in not just age, but race, ethnicity? Have you noticed that?
Oh, yeah. No. Yes. So there's big conversation around diversity. And so no, largely by and large, the field is working on that, of course, in all sorts of ways. So no, that's definitely something that needs to be needs to be addressed and is being addressed. This is a very good question. I should maybe ask this question more regularly of my guests about what they see in who attends their events, their workshops, their courses, who their partners are, who their clients are. That's a very good question. I haven't asked that question specifically. Outside of the general conversation about us needing to involve more people.
And I'm not saying we have to solve, this issue and solve the issue of we need world peace. But I will say that from an other body, a person who does not, who feels other, it may be harder for a person who feels like they're not a part of the community to then advocate for something that they don't feel a part of.
Absolutely.
So then you have to deal with another form of inertia, another form of leaps of faith and not feeling powerless and alone and separate.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's part of the conversation that's being had in the field overall. But what I like about what you just asked is that I could do my part and ask the people who I interview with, who I speak with, and find out on a different level, because the conversations within the field, again, are organization to organization. It's not what's happening outside of the organizations per se. I have an avenue to ask people what's happening at that more targeted, more intricate level, beyond outside the big organization. So thank you for that. That's really a good thing to do. That's another way that I could help fill the gap of what's happening out there. About beyond the regular conversation, the usual conversations that that's been had for a while now. Yeah.
Have you talked to anyone who has focused on the direct link between our human health and the health of nature, the health of our planet?
I've had conversations about that. Not a specific interview, but on this topic, there's definitely a link. You want me to cite? I'm sure I have it in my research paper somewhere. But the connection between health and nature is definitely there. Definitely a connection. How could there not be? If you want just a bunch of, what are we going to call this? Anecdotal information. Everyone who I've spoken to in general, that is a fact. It's there. The relationship is clear. Just in my own experience between the front yard and the backyard. That it's such a starkly different emotion. It's like, oh, I can't sit out here. I try to sit in the backyard, but I just can't do it. And and then there is definitely the environment here, like all the warehouses and the traffic and the concrete and all that. That's a different mindset. It just really is a different level of stress than sitting still for hours on end on the freeway or on a busy road. That's
Agreed. So do you have any closing thoughts or pointers that you'd like to share with the audience before I ask you the last question?
I would say I would go back to finding out what's happening in your local community. Ask someone, even just walk into the library, or a local museum, or if you know if there's a nature center, ask them what's happening in the area. What events should I know about? Some events are being led by local groups and natural resource organizations, and there are even some events on the city level that really are open for everybody. So, for example, I learned this last year. I went to my first policy event, and when I was there, I was halfway expecting, because one of the themes for that event was, one of the strands was climate. And so I went, and I was half expecting to see people who I knew, but they were absent. There were other, I would say, environmental folks from that type of community, a couple, faces that I recognized, but no one else was there. And so what that taught me is that a policy event is for everybody. They just look like they're not for everybody, but they're not just for elected officials and for businesses. And they had absolutely fantastic facilitated long, 2-3 hour sessions for each strand on the second day. And the conversations that the few of us who I recognize as environmental folks, and then everybody else was having for those, however long that was, I don't remember anymore, but it was a long breakout session. It was rich. It was wonderful. And more people need to know that conversations like that are happening. And that just because it says, you see the word policy and you see people in business attire, doesn't mean that it's not for you. They just look that way. And since then I've been to 2 other policy events, and one that was hosted by state. Again, and in every case, it's for everybody. There isn't anything happening that should have excluded people from attending. It's just in the way that they present the event. It looks like, it's not for me. Yeah,
take the leap.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's been something that I've taken away from our conversation is finding it within ourselves, finding that whatever inspires us, if it's a little pearl of a little nugget of something that's going to get us motivated to go find a way in which we can make a difference, it's up to us to do that as well. Take the leap. Yeah. I love that.
Absolutely.
I love that. So, Tania, what is your personal definition of what it means to be healthy?
It's movement, social connection, and sunshine. Being outdoors. Health to me means all those things, really. It's movement comes first, and then being with other people, and then being outside for sure. That to me is what health means. And then, of course, there's eating well, eating clean burning fuel, or whatever that is for you at that moment. I personally find more energy and lighter meals than big, heavy meals. But that's just me. No shoulding or should less on yourself is part of that. Yeah, because I've learned, I think people come to that conclusion in their own way. And I've learned it in my own way. So
don't should on yourself. I love that.
Don't should on yourself. Yeah.
Tania, thank you so very much for being here. This is as I will say again, this was a long overdue conversation, and I am thrilled that you are the person who agreed to come on the show to talk about this, to start the conversation.
Thank you, Nadine. Thank you so much. It's so good to sit and speak with you again.
Wise women, move from last place to first place in your life. Stop using your body as a battlefield. Let's raise health together with a customized health plan just for you. Contact me at npkhealthintegration.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.